It was a quiet Thursday night when the knock came. Soft at first, then firmer. Daniel glanced at the clock. 9:45 p.m. No one ever came by that late. He lived alone in a small cul-de-sac on the edge of Maple Ridge. Most nights, he'd read by the window or listened to old records until he fell asleep. Nothing ever happened there. That night broke the calm. He hesitated before opening the door. Through the frosted glass, he saw a figure holding something. Maybe a coat, maybe a box. He wasn't sure. When he opened it, he saw her, Clare, the woman who had moved into the house across the street 2 weeks ago. The one who always smiled politely but kept her distance. Her brown hair was damp from the rain and she looked worried. "Hey, sorry to bother you," she said softly. "My power's out." "I didn't know who else to ask." Daniel blinked. "Oh yeah, of course. Come in, it's cold out there." She stepped inside, dripping water onto the rug. She laughed awkwardly, brushing her hair back. "I swear I tried everything. The fuse box is fine, but nothing turns on." Daniel handed her a towel. "Let me grab my flashlight. I can take a look." They walked across the street together. The rain had slowed, leaving the air heavy and still. He noticed the faint smell of wet leaves and pine, the kind that reminded him of autumn evenings years ago. Inside her house, everything was dark except for a candle flickering in the kitchen. Her furniture was half unpacked, boxes labeled books and winter clothes stacked by the wall. He found the fuse box and checked it carefully. "Looks like one breaker tripped," he said, flipping it back. A soft hum filled the air as the lights flickered on. Claire sighed with relief. "You saved me." "I thought I'd have to sleep in the dark," he smiled. "No heroics here. Just a lucky switch." She leaned against the counter, smiling back. "Still, thank you." "I owe you," Daniel waved it off. "Don't mention it. I'm just glad you didn't have to call an electrician at this hour." As he turned to leave, she said, "Wait, you want some coffee?" "I still owe you for coming out in the rain." He hesitated. He hadn't shared coffee with anyone in months. His last relationship had ended quietly. Too quietly, a year ago, leaving him with nothing but time and silence. "Sure," he said finally. She smiled, almost shyly. "Give me a few minutes. I'll brew something fresh." He sat by her kitchen table while she moved around, setting mugs and sugar on the counter. There was a gentleness in her movements, something careful, as if she was still learning how to be comfortable here. "So," Daniel said, "you just moved here from Vermont," she answered. "It's strange, isn't it? Moving to a new place at 32. Everyone already has their lives set." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." She glanced at him, curious. "Divorced?" He gave a small laugh. "No, just done trying for a while?" Claire smiled faintly. "I know that feeling." They talked for an hour, about small things at first. Work, the neighborhood, the old maple tree that leaned over the street. But as the rain started again outside, their words grew slower, deeper. Daniel told her about his job at the hardware store. She told him she worked remotely as a designer. When she laughed, it filled the quiet room with warmth. At some point, the clock on the stove blinked 11:40. Daniel realized how late it was. "I should probably let you get some rest," he said. Claire stood by the door, her hand on the frame. "Thank you again, Daniel, really. I'm glad you were home." He smiled gently. "Any time, Claire." As he stepped back into the rain, she called after him, "Maybe next time I'll bring the coffee to you." He turned slightly, half smiling. "I'll hold you to that." Back inside his own house, Daniel sat near the window again. The rain streaked down the glass, and across the street he could see her lights glowing softly now, safe and steady. Something about that small, unexpected night felt different. He couldn't explain it, but there was a quiet pull, something new threading its way through the ordinary. He didn't know then that one late knock would change everything. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Later that night, as Daniel turned off his lamp, he thought he saw a shadow cross Claire's window. A brief flicker of movement that made his chest tighten. Maybe it was just her closing the curtains. Maybe it wasn't. The next morning, Daniel woke early. The rain had passed, leaving the air cool and bright. He stood by his window again, coffee in hand, watching as the neighborhood slowly came to life. Across the street, Claire's car was still in the driveway. A few boxes sat near her porch, and a small wind chime hung by the door, glinting in the sunlight. He smiled without meaning to. By noon, he was back from work. Just as he parked, he noticed her walking toward him with a small paper bag. "Morning, neighbor," she said with a grin. "You saved me last night." "I brought muffins," Daniel laughed. "Muffins as a thank you gift? That's pretty official." "Blueberry," she said proudly. "I baked them this morning. Still warm." They sat on his porch, eating muffins and talking like old friends. She asked about the town, where to buy fresh bread, which cafe had the best coffee, who to avoid at the community meetings. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months when she talked about Vermont, her quiet life there. Her ex-fiancé, the house she left behind, her voice softened. There was pain in her words, the kind that lingers even when you try to sound fine. She didn't dwell on it. But he could tell, after a moment, she said quietly, "I moved here to start over, to feel like myself again." Daniel looked at her, understanding more than he said. "Then maybe you picked the right place." Her eyes met his for a brief second, then she smiled. "Maybe." They spent the afternoon fixing a loose board on her porch. She insisted on helping, though she clearly didn't know how to use a hammer. Every time she missed a nail, she laughed so hard it made him laugh too. By the time they finished, the sun was low. She brushed sawdust off her jeans and said, "You're a good guy, Daniel. Not many people would spend their Saturday fixing someone else's porch." He shrugged. It was leaning toward a lawsuit. "I just saved you from it." She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." But she was smiling. That evening, she came by again, this time with 2 mugs of cocoa. "You said I owed you coffee. This is better." They sat on his front steps. The street was quiet, only a few porch lights flickering here and there. She asked about his family, and he told her about his sister in Seattle, about losing his parents years ago. She listened the way people rarely do, really listening, not just waiting to talk. And when he asked about hers, she grew quiet. "We're not close anymore," she said finally. "Things got complicated after my dad passed." He didn't press. He just nodded, letting the silence sit between them like an understanding. When she stood to leave, she smiled softly. "You make this place feel less lonely, Daniel." Her words lingered long after she went inside. Later that night, as he sat by the window again, something caught his eye. Across the street, Claire's living room light flickered. He thought nothing of it, until he saw her silhouette move quickly toward the door. Then another shadow moved behind her. Daniel stood up fast. The figure was tall, sharp-shouldered. It moved too close, too suddenly. He grabbed his phone and started toward the door. But before he could step outside, Claire's lights went dark. The street fell silent. He froze on the porch, every sense awake. A moment later, her front door opened. Claire stepped out slowly, looking around. She spotted him, half standing on his steps. Her voice trembled. "Daniel, can you come here?" He crossed the street in seconds. "What happened?" She swallowed hard. "Someone was in my backyard. I heard footsteps, and then I saw someone by the window." Daniel scanned the shadows behind her house. The rain had left muddy patches, and faint footprints led toward the trees. "Call the police," he said quietly. She hesitated, gripping his arm. What if it was nothing? "Maybe I imagined it," he shook his head. "No, you didn't." Her hand tightened around his sleeve. "Can you stay for a bit? Just until I calm down?" He nodded. "Of course." Inside, she sat on the couch, trying to steady her breathing. Daniel checked every window, every door, before sitting across from her. Neither spoke for a while. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Finally, she whispered, "I thought I moved here to feel safe again." He looked at her, his voice steady. "You are safe. I'm right here." Her eyes lifted to meet his, a flicker of trust breaking through the fear. For a moment, neither moved. But something unspoken passed between them, something fragile, forming in the quiet. Outside, a branch scraped against the window, and she flinched. Daniel reached over, placing his hand gently on hers. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're not alone," she nodded, eyes wet but calm now. "Thank you, Daniel. I don't know what I'd do without you." He didn't know how to answer that. He just stayed there beside her until she finally fell asleep on the couch. But as he looked around her dimly lit living room, something on the back door caught his eye, a smear of mud that didn't match the rest. Someone had been there. Daniel barely slept that night. He stayed on her couch until sunrise, listening for every creak, every gust of wind. By morning, the fear had faded into a heavy unease. Claire stirred awake, blinking at the light filtering through the curtains. "You stayed," she whispered. He nodded. "Didn't seem right to leave." She smiled faintly. "You didn't have to, but—" "I'm glad you did." They went outside together. The muddy footprints from the night before were still there, deep, fresh, leading toward the woods behind the row of houses. Daniel crouched, studying them. "These are too big to be yours." Claire folded her arms, shivering. "Do you think someone's watching me?" He glanced at her, then at the empty street. "Maybe, but not for long." They called the police, and 2 officers arrived within the hour. They searched the area, made a report, and promised to send patrols for the next few nights. Claire thanked them, but Daniel could see her hands shaking. After the officers left, she said quietly, "This isn't the first time." Daniel turned to her. "What do you mean?" "In Vermont," she said, her voice barely steady. "A few months before I moved, someone started leaving notes on my door. Nothing threatening, just strange. Like they were watching me. Did you ever find out who it was?" She shook her head. "I thought it was over when I left." "Guess I was wrong." Daniel's chest tightened. "You should have told me last night." "I didn't want to sound crazy," she said softly. "You've been kind enough already." He exhaled slowly. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone in this." For the rest of the morning, he helped her set up security cameras, one by the porch, another near the back door. She insisted on buying them, but he handled the wiring. By the time they finished, the tension had eased a little. She even smiled again when he teased her about the crooked angle of one camera. "Don't worry," he said. "If anyone tries to sneak around, we'll see them coming a mile away." "We?" she asked softly. He met her eyes. "Yeah, we." That one word made something shift between them, small, but real. Later that day, Daniel went home to change before heading to work. But as he reached his door, he noticed a small envelope tucked under his mat. No name, no address, just folded paper. He opened it slowly. Inside was a note typed in uneven font. "You shouldn't get involved." Daniel froze. His stomach tightened. He looked across the street. Claire's house looked calm. The curtains drawn, no movement inside. He slipped the note into his jacket pocket and locked his door, his pulse quickening. At work, he couldn't focus. Every few minutes, his mind returned to that line. Who would send something like that? How did they know? That evening, when he got home, he walked straight to Claire's house. She opened the door, smiling at first, then noticing his expression. "Daniel, what's wrong?" He handed her the note. "Found this under my door." She stared at it, her face draining of color. "Oh my God!" He tried to keep his voice steady. "You said the notes before weren't threatening. But this feels different." She nodded slowly. "It does." They sat at her kitchen table, the note lying between them. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Claire said, "Maybe it's just someone trying to scare me." "Or warn you," Daniel said quietly. She met his eyes. "Do you think I'm in danger?" He wanted to say no, to make her feel safe. But he couldn't lie. "I think someone's watching. And now they know I'm here too." Her voice trembled. "Then maybe I should go." Daniel shook his head. "Running didn't help last time, so what do I do?" He hesitated, then said, "You stay. You live your life. And we find out who's behind this. That night, he set up an extra motion sensor light between their houses, facing the street. He checked every lock, every window, before finally walking her to the door. When she turned to go inside, she paused. "Daniel, why are you doing all this for me?" He smiled softly. "Because I'd want someone to do the same for me." She didn't look away. "You're different, you know that?" He chuckled quietly. "I've been told." For a moment, she just stood there, looking at him under the porch light, like she wanted to say something else but couldn't find the words. "Good night." "Daniel," she said finally. "Good night." "Claire?" He waited until she was safely inside before returning home. But as he reached his front steps, his phone buzzed. A new notification from the camera he'd installed earlier that day. Motion detected at 9:16 p.m. He opened the video clip. The image was grainy but clear enough. A figure stood in the middle of the street, facing his house. Still. Watching. The same shape he'd seen in the dark the night before. And then, slowly, it turned its head, toward Claire's window. Daniel barely breathed as he replayed the clip. The figure stood in the rain-soaked street for nearly a full minute, unmoving, before fading into the shadows. He couldn't make out a face, just the shape of a coat, the outline of a hood. It sent a cold rush through him. He called the police again. They came, checked the footage, and promised to increase patrols. But one officer's words stuck with him. Could just be a prank. Kids around here get bored. Daniel wanted to believe that. He really did. The next day, Claire tried to go about her routine, working on her laptop by the window, pretending everything was normal. But Daniel could see the worry behind her smile. Around lunchtime, she crossed the street with 2 sandwiches wrapped in foil. "Peace offering," she said, setting them on his porch railing. "Turkey and cheese. Best I could do under stress," he smiled. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to. Besides," she said with a shaky laugh, "you're my unofficial security guard now." He chuckled softly. "Guess that makes you my boss." For a while, the tension lifted. They ate together, trading quiet jokes, trying to forget the strange note, the figure in the street. But by evening, as dusk rolled in, the air felt different, heavy again. Daniel checked the cameras before bed. No movement, no alerts. Still, he couldn't sleep. Around 11:15, he decided to step outside just to be sure. The night was still. Only the faint hum of streetlights filled the air. Then he noticed something at the edge of Claire's lawn. A piece of paper fluttering against the grass. He picked it up. The same uneven font as before. "You were warned." His stomach dropped. He ran to Claire's door and knocked hard. She opened it, startled. "Daniel?" He handed her the paper. "This was on your lawn." She stared at it, her hands trembling. "Why is this happening?" He didn't have an answer. He just knew he couldn't leave her alone now. "I'll stay here tonight," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be by yourself." She didn't argue this time. "Okay." They checked the locks again, drew the curtains, and settled in the living room. The clock ticked toward midnight. Rain began to fall softly outside. They sat across from each other, talking quietly about anything but what was happening. Claire told him about her dad, how he used to fix clocks and play old country songs on Sundays. Daniel listened, nodding, letting her voice fill the silence. "You ever feel like life keeps testing you?" she asked suddenly. "Like every time you try to move on, something drags you back?" He nodded. "All the time. But sometimes it's not trying to drag you back. Maybe it's just pushing you toward the right people." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft. "Maybe that's what this is then." A small smile crossed her face, and for the first time in days, she seemed calm. They eventually drifted off on opposite couches, the glow from the lamp fading slowly. But around 2:30 in the morning, Daniel woke to a faint tapping. Not from the door, from the window behind the couch. He sat up fast. The tapping came again, deliberate, steady. He moved quietly, heart pounding, and peered through the curtain. No one was there. Only rain. He was about to step back when he noticed something smeared on the glass. Muddy fingerprints. 5 of them, pressed near the edge of the window frame. He backed away and whispered, "Claire." She stirred, half awake. "What is it?" "Don't move," he said quietly. "Someone's been outside." Her eyes widened. "Did you see them?" He shook his head. "Just prints. Fresh ones." She covered her mouth, fear rising in her eyes. Daniel turned off the light, grabbed his phone, and checked the camera feed. Motion alert, 2:26 a.m. He opened it. The same figure, now standing just beyond the porch light, staring straight at the camera. This time, he could see more detail. A tall man wearing a dark jacket, face half hidden by the hood, and in his hand, something shiny. A lighter, flicking on and off. The screen froze for a second, then went black. The camera had been covered. Claire's voice trembled. "Daniel, what do we do?" He took a breath. "We stay quiet. The police are on their way." He sent the footage through the emergency app, then whispered, "Come on, upstairs." They climbed to the guest room, where they could see the street from above. Below, the man stood in the middle of the road again, facing her house, still, unmoving. Then, slowly, he bent down and placed something on the ground. Claire gasped softly. "What is that?" Daniel couldn't tell from the distance, but it looked like another envelope. They watched as the man straightened, turned toward the woods, and disappeared into the dark. The police arrived 10 minutes later, but by then he was gone. They found only the envelope. Inside was a single photo, blurry, but enough to make Claire tremble. It was a picture of her and Daniel, sitting together on his porch that afternoon. Someone had taken it from across the street. The air felt colder the next morning. Even the sunlight looked pale. Claire barely spoke as she sat at Daniel's kitchen table, staring at the photo the police had taken as evidence. "It's like he's right here," she whispered, "watching every move we make." Daniel poured her a cup of coffee, his hands steady even though his stomach was tight. "They'll find him. They've got his prints from the window." But he didn't sound convinced. And she knew it. The police had left after asking their questions, promising to patrol the area again. Still, neither of them felt safe. The figure hadn't broken in. He hadn't spoken. He just watched. That made it worse. By noon, Daniel suggested she come over to his place for a while. "You shouldn't stay there alone," he said. "At least until they figure out who he is." She nodded quietly. "I don't want to be alone anyway." They spent the day trying to feel normal. He cooked simple pasta. She folded laundry by his window. Every now and then, one of them would glance outside, just in case. When dusk came, the street lights flickered on, and everything looked ordinary again. Cars passed. A neighbor walked their dog. Nothing out of place. For the first time in days, Claire exhaled without shaking. "Maybe he's gone," she said softly. "Maybe he just wanted to scare me." Daniel didn't answer right away. "Maybe," he said finally, though he didn't believe it. They watched a movie to fill the silence, the kind that made them forget for a while. She leaned against the couch cushion, her eyes half closed, and said, "It's strange. I never thought moving here would lead to this." He looked at her, voice quiet. "Neither did I. But I'm glad you knocked on my door that night." She smiled faintly. "Me too." For a moment there was peace again, the soft kind that comes after fear. Then, around 9:20, Daniel's phone buzzed. Another motion alert. He froze. The camera at Claire's house, the one by the front porch. He opened the app, heart hammering. At first, the image looked blank. Then a small flicker of movement, the edge of a sleeve, a shadow passing by. The figure bent down again, near the same spot as before. But this time, he wasn't holding an envelope. He was holding a small matchbox. Daniel jumped to his feet. "Stay here," he said firmly. Claire's eyes widened. "Daniel, don't go out there." He grabbed his jacket anyway. "He's trying to scare you." "I'm not letting him." He ran across the street, heart racing. scanning every corner. The man was gone, but there by the steps lay the matchbox. He picked it up carefully. Inside were burnt matches, blackened tips still faintly smelling of smoke. He heard Claire's voice behind him. "Daniel, please come back." He turned toward her, and that's when he saw it. Behind her house, near the edge of the woods, a faint movement. Someone standing between the trees, just far enough to stay hidden. Daniel started toward him, but the figure vanished again, swallowed by darkness. The police came one last time that night. They searched the woods, even brought dogs, but there was no trace. Only a few footprints near the fence line and a torn piece of dark fabric snagged on the wire. An officer told them quietly, "If this person wanted to hurt you, they would have by now." "Maybe it's someone who knew you before, Claire." She looked pale. "From Vermont?" "Could be," the officer said, jotting something in his notebook. "We'll stay alert." After they left, the street went quiet again. Just the sound of wind brushing through the trees. Claire sat on Daniel's porch steps, hugging her knees. "I can't live like this," she whispered. Always waiting for the next note, the next sound. Daniel sat beside her. "You won't have to." "Not anymore." She looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "I called my sister," he said. "She's got an extra room in Seattle. You can stay there for a while, just until things settle." Her eyes filled. "Daniel, I can't ask you." "You're not asking," he said gently. "I'm offering." She covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "I don't even know how to thank you," he smiled softly. "You already did. You trusted me." They sat there in silence for a while, the night finally calm again. 2 days later, she packed a few bags. Daniel helped load them into his car. The police promised to keep an eye on the property just in case. Before she left, she turned to him and said, "You were the only person who made me feel safe again." "Don't forget that," he nodded, his throat tight. "You'll be okay, Claire. You deserve peace." She stepped closer, hesitating for a moment, then hugged him tightly. "Goodbye, Daniel." He watched as her car disappeared down the road, her taillights fading into the distance. For the first time in weeks, the street was silent again. Empty. That night, Daniel sat by the window, the same spot where it all began. He looked toward her darkened house, wondering if she'd ever come back. As he turned off the lamp, his phone buzzed once more, a new camera alert. From the porch camera at his house this time, he opened it slowly. The image loaded, grainy, faint light from the street. And there it was. A single object placed by his door, a burned matchbox, and next to it, a note. "You shouldn't have gotten involved.